Okay, so Mr. Goldberg is living in New York, and he made a living. Everything was okay, but not a too comfortable to be mekayim in the mitzvah of ksiva Sefer Torah. He always wanted to have written a Sefer Torah, be mekayim that mitzvah. It's very expensive, as we know, and he wanted to be mekayim it. So he heard about this community. He heard about this community in Indianapolis that was growing, and he heard there's a kollel there and everything. Looked into housing, found a mansion for $500,000, sold his tiny little house in New York for $1.5 million, and all of a sudden he found himself a nice amount of money, and he felt like maybe he could be mekayim this mitzvah that he always wanted to do of having his own personal Sefer Torah. So still he knows he has a lot of expenses and a nice Jewish family, but he figured he just got a lot of Maaser. If he just made $1 million, just made $100,000 of Maaser money, which anyway he's gonna be giving away. So he figured, great idea. I'll use some Maaser money I just got, and I'll purchase myself a Sefer Torah. So the question is he allowed to do that? Is he allowed to use his Maaser money in order to purchase a Sefer Torah? So, we know that there's a mitzvah. It's coming up in Parshas Vayelech next week. It's the 613th mitzvah in the Torah, Minyan Taryag, Ba'ata Kisu Lachem Shira Azos, the mitzvah of ksiva Sefer Torah. So, can a person, start with that question, can a person use Maaser money to accomplish a mitzvah? So, what does everybody think?
Well, he could certainly use it, but the question is if he's actually mekayim the mitzvah. In other words,
you're saying he should certainly be able to use the Maaser money.
Yeah, the question is if he's mekayim his personal obligation.
Well, he has the Sefer Torah now that he owns.
I think he's good. I think he's good to go.
He definitely has if he purchases it, he definitely has the Sefer Torah. The question is, can he use Maaser money for a Sefer Torah? Now, maybe we should broaden this question.
He's keeping the Sefer Torah.
He's going to own the Sefer Torah.
He's going to own, or let's say he's giving it to the shul.
So typical practice, my understanding is that this is basically the way it generally is done, is that when a person donates, what we call donates the Sefer Torah, what that really means is what they're doing is they're hiring the Sefer, they're getting a Sefer Torah written. They have technical ownership over the Sefer Torah, and it's on lend to the shul or the Beis Medrash, wherever they are, so to speak, donating to. But they want to maintain ownership of it because they want to be mekayim this mitzvah. So, if we broaden the question, would anyone here think to use Maaser money for Daled Minim? We have Daled Minim coming up, or to purchase a sukkah, to buy a pair of tefillin. We could really broaden the question over here, seemingly.
Is there a separate chiyuv of how much you're supposed to spend on mitzvos? Isn't that a separate halacha?
Yes, so there is. Yeah, so there is a din of how much money a person is obligated to spend on a mitzvah, meaning that if the cost of a mitzvah exceeds a certain amount, then they are exempt from putting out that cost. According to many poskim, that is a fifth of the person's overall monetary wealth. A fifth of that they would not be obligated to spend on a mitzvah. According to those poskim, it's not so. It's not going to be applicable in so many cases. depending on the person, but very often it won't be too applicable. There are other poskim that say that anything that's an exceedingly large amount for that particular mitzvah, that would be. There's an exemption even if it's not a full fifth of the person's, just an exorbitant amount. Someone's charging $100 for hadassim. So only hadassim left in town, and charges like that type of thing. So $100 is not a fifth of his bank account, but some posts can hold it. That's also Torah. But that's really a separate sugya. It's really a different topic.
But in this case, it could be that he's exempt from paying full amount. Maybe part of it is. Maybe we could at least say that he can pay more than, if he could use Maaser for more than a fifth. If it's more than a fifth, I don't know if that would.
Could he use Maaser if it's more than a? So if it's more than a fifth, technically he would need a heter, meaning that halacha that we just mentioned, that a person does not spend more than a fifth on a mitzvah. That's actually technically not only a exemption, but it's actually an isser, because Chazal were concerned that a person would spend too much money and they would become an ani, they would become dependent. Therefore, they actually limited the amount that one is allowed to spend. So if a person falls into that isser, so then they wouldn't be able to do it. The Chavetz Chaim in the Sefer Ahavas Chesed, he lists, I think, 5 different heterim for when that isser does not apply and a person is allowed to spend more than a fifth. But that would really be a separate question. That if a person falls into the category where they can't spend more than a fifth, then they wouldn't be able to spend more than a fifth. If they don't, then they would be able to, but they would still have this question: in the money that they use, can they use their 10% that they are, we'll call it, obligated to give to Maaser?
What is the purpose of Maaser at this time?
What is the purpose of Maaser, meaning Maaser kesafim? What is the purpose of Maaser kesafim? So that's very good. So that's really the question that this leads into, is that what is, meaning that we have the mitzvah of Maaser kesafim is not explicitly in the Torah. There's allusions to the idea of giving a tenth, but the idea of giving a tenth of one's overall wealth is no explicit pasuk in the Torah. There are midrashim that see allusions and say, and we learn from them, that a person should give a tenth of their income to Maaser, to something. So really, the next question is like Mr. Miller is raising, is what is Maaser kesafim meant to go to, right? Regular Maaser, we know, goes to Leviim. Maaser Ani specifically goes to Aniyim. Maaser Sheni goes to Yerushalayim and is eaten in Yerushalayim. They all have a very specific purpose that's delineated in the Torah. But Maaser kesafim, where is it supposed to go? So there is a.
What was that last word? Was Maaser?
Where Maaser kesafim? Kesafim means the Maaser of his kesef. Meaning of his money that he makes. So what is the intention of that mitzvah? So there's a lot of discussion about this. The Rama in Siman Reish Mem Tes in Hilchos Tzedakah, he brings down from the Maharil. The Maharil is one of the great Ashkenazi Rishonim. A lot of the Rama is based on him, and he says he takes issue with people. It's actually in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah. We're coming to that time of year that people are often contributing to different things. And the Maharil says that he takes issue with people that are using Maaser money to buy candles and other such needs for the shul. The Maharil says, and even though we're talking at a time there's no electricity, this is paying the electric bill, this is basic necessities of the shul. The Maharil says that money should not be Maaser money. He says because rather it should be specifically for the aniyim. The Maharil says it should specifically be for aniyim, and therefore he takes issue with, apparently there was some type of common practice at the time that people were giving their Maaser kesafim to other sources other than poor people. And the Maharil said, you're supposed to use other money for that. Maaser kesafim is specifically for aniyah. And there's a big discussion what the understanding of this Rama is. Right on the side of the page, the commentary, the Be'er Hagola, who's right on the side of Shulchan Aruch, and gives all the very, very concise, usually doesn't say much of a commentary, usually just gives the source. But here he makes a comment, and he says that the Rama is talking about that the person has a prior commitment or understood obligation to the shul. His membership says that he should give this, he has a pledge that says that he should give this, some type of understanding was created that this is his responsibility. And only in that case does the Rama say that a person is not allowed to use Maaser kesafim, says the Be'er Hagola. But if a person has no prior commitments, no prior understanding of what he's going to be using his Maaser kesafim for, his 10%, then he may use it for these things. He may use it for benefits of the community, supporting the shul, covering these bills. That is what the Be'er Hagola writes. Now let's just take a step back and understand what's the issue over here. Why would there be a problem even with that? So the basic idea, we have it in the Gemara in Beya and the Gemara Menachos, that a davar shebechoiva eina ba ela min achula, something which a person has an obligation to pay for, he cannot use funds that are attributed to something else. Right? If you have an obligation to pay Ruvain because he gave you a loan, you can't use funds that you have that are supposed to be used to pay something else or whatever other bill it is, that those funds are going towards this bill. You can't use it for paying up a different bill, right? You have two separate bills. So similarly, when it comes to mitzvos, if a person has a chiyuv to spend the money for one thing, then they can't use that same money and double up, so to speak, and use it for something else. So let's say, with this example over here that the Be'er Hagola says, this person, let's take a more extreme example. The person made a pledge, they came to him, they said, listen, Mr. whatever your name is, we need to raise some funds for the shul, and we want to ask you, can you cover the electricity bill for the year? And he says, yes, I'll take that upon myself. Right? So that becomes his obligation. He becomes obligated. He took it on as a neder. It's a neder with var mitzvah, right? Tairabam talked about last night. And he took it on as a separate obligation. So he now needs to do that. So he has a separate obligation to use 10% of his money on for Maaser kesafim, to give away 10%. So to pay one obligation with another obligation is the problem that we have over here. Another example, this is also in a Maharil. This is probably the most common application we have of this, is matanos yonim. Right? Matanos yonim is, the Maharil says, that's a separate obligation, a separate mitzvah that applies specifically on Purim, to be misameach the aniyim, to give aniyim specifically for Purim funds. That is something that is a separate obligation. So for a person to use Maaser on that, says the Maharil, is not correct. It's doubling up. Those are two individual obligations. So the question over here would be, if we go like this Be'er Hagola, so the way to understand the Rama would be saying that that it's only when you have a specific chiyuv, when you have a specific obligation to pay for something else, that's where you have this problem. There is something which would seem to support this, which is a Chuvas Maram, that's brought in all the commentaries, the Shach and the Drisha, that talks about a person who asked, he was asked whether a person can use Maaser money to purchase sefarim. Other such mitzvah purposes, says to use them or because there was a need for them. And he asked this question: can he use his Maaser money to purchase sefarim? And the Maram basically said that, if the person needs to, they wouldn't be able to purchase the sefarim otherwise, then they may. So many commentaries say basically that if you understand, with the Baragol's interpretation of the Rama, it appears that there's no argument over here. Maybe, as long as you don't have a pre-existing obligation, you can use your Maaser money, not specifically only for the purposes of aniyim, but maybe you could use it towards mitzvahs itself. So this becomes a very big debate.
That's the scenario you laid out at the beginning. This guy had no other obligations, so he could buy the Sefer.
Oh. So the question becomes, how do we deal with the Sefer Torah? On the one hand, it says in Parshas Vayelech, according to the way that Chazal, in order to the way our rabbis interpret it, as it's listed in the Rambam, mitzvah, the Sefer Chinuch, all the counters of mitzvos, all of them write this mitzvah that there's an obligation upon each Jew to write their own Sefer Torah. So on the one hand, it would seem to be it's a separate obligation. The question we all have is that probably none of us here, and very few people we know, have their own Sefer Torah, had their own Sefer Torah written. So what's going on with that? Are we all being mevatel mitzvos aseh? Should we all have started funds when we were little boys, starting to set aside a separate account for how we're going to purchase a Sefer Torah when we get older?
So we've done that here as fundraisers, but you buy a book, so
right.
I don't know if you're Yotzi with that.
So that's a need for the shul, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's certainly a mitzvah. Any contribution towards any writing of any Torah, and for sure a Sefer Torah, is certainly a great mitzvah. But this particular chiyuv of owning one's own Sefer Torah is only accomplished through a person owning their own Sefer Torah. So the Rosh, the great Rishon, says that there is a fundamental difference between how learning was done earlier and how learning is done now, and that affects the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. It used to be that there was Torah Shebechsav and there was Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh was just the oral law. People learned oral law orally. There wasn't really sefarim. They learned Torah Shebechsav from the Sefer Torah itself. People used, back in the day, I don't know exactly how long we're talking about, a long time ago, they used the Sefer Torah not just for Kriyas HaTorah the way we use it, but they actually learned from the Sefer Torah. We just had a couple weeks ago in the Parsha that the Melech should have his Sefer Torah so that he should learn it all of his days. This was the practice. People learned that was really the Sefer you had to have. You didn't really have to have, all the 15,000 sefarim that we have. You just had to have a Sefer Torah, and that was your obligation. That's what you had to have, and otherwise you were learning oral law. And already for a long time ago, that started to change. I assume it was mostly with the writing of oral law.
The Gutenberg press.
It could be that the press made it even more, but the Rosh is way before that. Already probably definitely over 1,000 years ago. This is already much different. So
Wow, what happened 1,000 years ago? They were doing it all by hand.
yeah, so they were doing it by hand. So svarim were much less common, but still that was what they were using. It was much more difficult to get svarim, and everything was a lot of work, and they had to have scribes, and everything was based on scribes. But they were still, that was their primary learning. They had gemaras, they had commentaries, they had halachic works. That was their main learning. So the Rosh says that nowadays that our primary learning is from, even our Torah Shebechsav is from Chumash, right? It's not from the Sefer Torah itself. It's from Talmud, Mishnah. It's from all the commentaries that's how we fulfill our mitzvah of Torah learning, is through svarim. Says the Rosh, therefore in our day, the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah is accomplished through the purchase of svarim. Now this creates a very big debate, because the Beis Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, he brings down this Rosh, or he comments on the Rosh that was brought down in the Torah, and he says, how could such a thing be? The Torah writes that you have to have your own Sefer Torah, and we could create an interpretation afterwards that the Sefer Torah, that you could accomplish it in a different way. How could it be that there was such a change? And the Beis Yosef therefore interprets the Rosh as saying that this doesn't mean that there's no obligation to write a Sefer Torah anymore. It means that in addition to the regular obligation of writing a Sefer Torah, now there's a new obligation because we need to purchase svarim, because that's what we learn from. So the Beis Yosef understands that this is only coming, the Rosh and the Torah who writes his father's words, they're only coming to add that nowadays don't think that it's just about getting a Sefer Torah, you need to get svarim, because that's what you learn from. And many other sources were bothered with this question and other questions and said the same. Very, very strong sources. The Taz and the Gra and the Shagas Aryeh, many went like this Beis Yosef and interpreted the Rosh in that way, that the Rosh is not coming to be mafkia, to uproot, to say that everything changed and there's no longer a mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. Rather, he's coming to add. Now, if we would go like this, then, first of all, we might still have a little bit of difficulty understanding our common practice, in the way that we are not so focused on each getting our own Sefer Torah. But seemingly regarding our question of whether one can use Maaser money to purchase a Sefer Torah, seemingly it would be a problem. According to the Beis Yosef and those that follow him, this is a separate obligation. It's an individual chiyuv. It's something which it's true. It's an expensive chiyuv. There's more of a room for being exempt because it's too hard to be mekayim, too hard to fulfill. But it's an obligation that if one has the means, that they are obligated to perform. There is, however, many other sources that say no. They say, and this is in the Shach, who's most prominent commentary on Yeridea, they say that no, the Rosh is coming to say more than that. The Rosh is coming to say, if you look in the pasuk that describes the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah, it says that you should learn it. It seems to imply that the purpose of the writing the Torah is in order to learn from it. And therefore the Shach says that the Rosh means to say it's replaced. The mitzvah of purchasing a Sefer Torah is replaced with purchasing svarim. And a person is no longer in our day obligated to purchase their own Sefer Torah. Might be a great thing, but it's not an obligation anymore. The obligation is to get the svarim that you need in order to learn, in order to fulfill your individual obligation of Talmud Torah. According to this opinion, purchasing a Sefer Torah is not a pure requirement. So if a person wanted to do it, and he was helping out his community, and the only way he could do it is through spending Maaser money, then presumably he would be allowed to do it. That seemingly it would be dependent on these two opinions. There are those that interpret the Rama literally and say that Maaser specifically needs to be given to Aniyim, and there are those that have that practice that are stringent about trying to give it specifically to Aniyim, but most are lenient about that, and potentially one would be able to be mekayim the mitzvah of Sefer Torah with Maaser money. There is one other thing to think about, that there are poskim that discuss if a person, to get out of this issue that the Baragola and other mentioned, that if there's an understanding that the money goes towards a specific thing, such as aniyim, such as poor people, that money becomes earmarked towards that and can't be used for another purpose. But if a person would make a tanai, would stipulate from the beginning that money is to be used for a different purpose, then it could be that also would help in allowing Maaser money to be used for a Sefer Torah. Anyone that has their own question whether to do this should ask their own Rav. But this should give a little bit of background into this question of whether a Sefer Torah may be used for Maaser money, and really in general, what type of money may one, what type of things, what type of mitzvos may one spend Maaser kesafim on. Shkach.
Shkach.